Good evening. The time is now 6:34. The July 12th meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors will come to order. Will the secretary call the roll?
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Here. Carl Evans has requested an excused absence this evening. Is there any objection to excusing Mr. Evans from this evening's meeting? If not, he is excused. There is a quorum present. Is there any objection to approve the agenda? If not, the agenda is approved. We do have one person that is wishing to address the board, Mr. Tom Love, to discuss green shirting. Welcome, Mr. Love. You do know that you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to go back in time about 5.5 years ago when I started doing this. At that time, I came in with a sunshine request, and that request was how many first graders don't read at first grade level, and then they get promoted to second grade. At the time, the acting superintendent, Dr. Green, replied that all the first graders read at first grade level before they're promoted to second, and we don't have social promotion. And I started to leave and started heading down the aisle, and I saw a lady, she's sitting right back here. She started nodding her head at me as I was walking to leave, and I thought, that's kind of strange, and I sat down, and the next person up was Dr. Murillo, and she said there wasn't anybody else to speak for public comment. The district had just lost its accreditation, and of course I thought there'd be a mob of people, but anyway, Dr. Murillo got up and she started talking about communication arts. Communication arts, I thought, well, maybe that's reading and writing. So she said that 70% of the students had failed in communication arts, and 30% of the third graders were 2 years or more behind. So anyway, I got a response from the district the day before I was signed up to speak again, and I was told that they would have the answer for me within the following Friday. So I got a call on Tuesday, and I was scheduled to speak on Wednesday. And then I thought, well, they already have the answer. They just didn't want me to know yet. And so I thought, well, I'll use that excuse to come and speak again to the board. And I got the call, or I went ahead and spoke again, and when I finished, Dr. Green said, we have a problem. Well, I got the call on Friday. Now, under state law, when you put a sunshine request in, it's required to be returned to you within 3 days, or they call you and say when they'll have it. So I got the call on Friday. This is like 6 weeks after I had requested it, and found out that 30% of the first graders were at kindergarten level when they were promoted to second grade. Kindergarten level. It's nearly 500 students. And so there was really a real problem. And so that's why I would like to ask tonight to put in another sunshine request to do basically the same thing, is to find out how many first graders did not complete first grade level, and how far behind are they? Are they, a few months behind? What reading level are they actually on? Or are they back at kindergarten level? How many were retained? At that time, there were 12 students retained out of 1,581 first graders. Only 12, less than 1%. And I think I don't like retention, but that's why I'm hoping we can green shirt some kindergarten students and make sure they're ready, because 40% of them, they say entering kindergarten here, were 11 months behind. We were attempting to basically graduate 40%, 39% at age 17. So they could have went ahead and taken a second year, got up to speed, been on level and ready to go, but we weren't doing that. So if you don't mind, Dr. Bedell, I'd like to make that request, not only to find out how many in different categories of reading level, but also what month they were born in. Because summer birthday, boys in particular, are developmentally younger than girls, and they would benefit the most. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Love, if you could make that formal request through the Office of Legal Services.
All right, I'd like to have it present.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any ad hoc committees that wish to report this evening? All right. Seeing none, for the presentation of this evening's revenue and expenditures report, the chair recognizes Board Treasurer Matthew Oates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is our monthly financial report ending May 31st. Obviously, we were not able to give this presentation last month due to the power outage, so we're about a couple weeks behind. But so first off, as we always do, we start out with our revenue. So far, year to date, we as of May, we are at $170 million, and that's compared to $161 million last year. We're about on pace for where we were there. And our county revenues, it's $4.3 million this year compared to $3.9 million last year. Again, the increases along assessed evaluations on the state assessed railroads and our utility tax. At the state level, we are at $12.4 million this year compared to $18.9 million last year. And that decrease is due to charter schools' weighted average daily attendance and also the district payment of weighted average daily attendance has decreased by 522. Our federal aid is at $34.6 million this year compared to $40.1 million. So that gives us a total revenue this year so far of $221,522,837. So that's where we are so far this year. On our expenditures, we are at $4.7 million year to date versus $3.8 last year. Our instruction budget is at $104 million this year compared to $113.6 million last year. Our support services are at $38.6 million this year compared to $42.5 million last year. Plant services are at roughly $23 million this year, which is about the same as last year. Our pupil transportation is at $11.9 million this year versus $10.7. A lot of that's due to our payments for our bus transportation, also our increased services due to implementation of the master plan. Community and adult services are at $3.2 million this year versus $2.4 last year. And our debt service is at $8 million this year versus $5.2, and that again is due to our first payments into our
construction bonds.
The $52 million construction bonds. So that gives us total expenditures of $194 million this year versus $201 million last year, and our revenue over expenditures, we are $27.6 million over at this current time compared to about $22.4 million last year. So go to our next slide. Same pie graph that shows where our money comes from. Largest part of that pie is our local revenue sources. We look at the next slide, that is where the money goes. And again, we see that our largest piece of the pie comes from classroom instruction. So this month, it decided to kind of highlight some of the estimated federal funding reduction that we are anticipating for this current budget year. As you know, due to administration change and thus policy changes, that has an impact on the funding that we can receive at our different for our different programming. So you take a look here at our entitlement spending on special ed. We are expecting about a $280,000 decrease in funding. In our elementary and secondary school counseling programs, we're expecting close to a $200,000 spending reduction. Our Title ID prevention and interventions are seeing about a $9,000 reduction. Our Title I improvement academic achievement grants, we are looking at a $1.7 million reduction for our budget. Our school improvement grants, I guess we're looking at seeing them come completely here in our next fiscal year. So that's about a $2.1 million loss. Our K-8 math grants are looking at $288,000 decrease. Our Title II teacher and principal training, we're looking at a $761,000 decrease, and our Title III LEP grant funding is looking at $318,000 decrease. And our Link 21st Century First Century grant for KC School Care, we're seeing an increase there of $580,000. This for total estimated funding, federal funding reduction, $5.1 million. So that will have some impact on how we're able to deliver services next year. So I believe is there, okay, so our next slide is our revenues over expenditures, our fiscal year graph. Again, the blue line represents our revenues, the red line represents our expenditures, and as you see, that $27 million gap that I spoke of earlier represents the gap between our blue line and our red line. So we're still trending this school year. So at this time, I'll open it up for any questions.
Ms. Manser has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Oakes, for this presentation. It is helpful and also distressing, so thanks for that. Because we're talking about loss of federal monies, many of these are passed through the feds, send it to the state, and then those are
yes.
passed to us. So are we also, you may not have the answer at this moment, but are we also looking at additional changes in other state grants and state funds, separate from the pass-through federal dollars? Are we also looking at any significant reduction in ongoing state resources that do not derive from the feds?
The only one I can speak of right now is the MPP, which we had kind of talked about before, the Missouri School Preschool Project. We're anticipating a loss of that subsidy. It was a declining grant, but they are having an application for one for next year. So again, these are all estimates because at admin 1, if we do get the funding, we will adjust the budget.
Does that answer satisfy your?
Yeah, I assume that the other districts are seeing similar decreases, so this is a conversation at the state level.
Yes.
Okay.
Miss, oh, go.
In fact, Ms. Manser, I just came back from a conference and was having a similar conversation with the superintendent in North Kansas City. He was asking me about how much of a cut have we taken with some of the title funds. They've taken a significant cut too. So yes, this is a discussion, and it is something that I do plan to bring to the commissioner when we are in Jeff City or whatever in 2 weeks. I forget, Tantara, 2 weeks.
Mr. Fierro?
Yes, Madam Chair. What I would appreciate in the near future would be to better understand our grant writing efforts. Certainly, Title I and some of these other ongoing pass-throughs, still require a lot of effort in putting together applications, et cetera. And I'd like to understand, what is our infrastructure? Do we have enough to make sure that we do that adequately? And then when I look at more traditional grants, like at the local level of private foundations, and then I know we have this new Children's Services Fund that's going to come online hopefully by the end of the year. I would just like to better understand what is our current capacity, and again, do we have adequate capacity to be able to pursue these grants on a regular basis? So again, I don't necessarily need an answer right now, but just wanted to.
Yeah, I won't spend a lot of time answering. I think we can provide a quick update in the Friday packet. But we did hire a grant writer that started on the 3rd of July. So we actually have a full-time grant writer in particular because we knew that these cuts were going to be coming down the pipeline, and even with the conversation that's happening at the federal level, we know that there's a lot of proposed cuts that will impact public education. So I will tell you that we have hired a full-time grant writer, and that is something that we did not have last year. I know that we were outsourcing with individuals and then working with Krista to kind of help through that, but now we do have staff, so we can provide you an update.
Great, thank you, Dr. Bedell. And my only, my last comment would be maybe something for the staff to consider as we go forward is taking another approach in terms of revenue maximization. So looking at where our current revenue is and are there opportunities to maximize that? I mean, I think the district is not unlike any organization or business. Typically, when there's fewer dollars, the approach is, well, where do we cut? And certainly that's just what everybody does. But I think also to balance that out and look at, you know, where do we have opportunities to maximize the current revenue we have? So just comment there. Thank you.
Mr. Oates, could you also consider a presentation regarding Title II funding, preparing, training, and recruiting high-quality teachers, and sparsing that out to help us understand how we're investing in our with Title II, just for a future presentation? Any other questions? The next item of business is a report of the superintendent. The chair recognizes our superintendent, Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the community and the board, we're going to make some adjustments. We have the graduation video highlight, which we will do third. We will move exploration of Lincoln Middle School, which is a conversation, to number 2. And we will start off with our strategic plan final report that we wanted to present to the community and to our board, which will also give us an opportunity to receive some additional input before we formally bring it to the board for a vote in August. So I would like to bring up Jesse Langs at this time to get us started with the presentation.
And excuse me for the interruption. I do want to remind individuals about the queue. In case they have a question, you can text your question to 816-213-0997, 816-213-0997. So as the presentations occur, there's an opportunity for our community and those listening live stream to participate.
Good evening. Over the past 7 months, KCPS has been embarking upon a student-centered 5-year strategic plan, and it's really been a community-driven process that's been inclusive of a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders that have participated throughout the process. So while I'm standing here, I'd like to thank all those who have participated throughout this. We've had students, parents, teachers, principals, community members, partners, elected officials such as yourselves on the board, central office staff, and a lot of the people that just care about kids in Kansas City. So we really want to thank everybody for their efforts as we've been developing this plan. So with that, we're very excited to share this plan tonight with the board of directors as well as the Kansas City community. So we will introduce Mutiu Fagbai from Performance Fact, who will go through the plan with you all.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the board for giving me a chance to present this evening. I understand we have about 30 minutes. Board President Robinson, thank you, other board members, and also the superintendent. What I'd like to do is to serve as the spokesperson for the work really done by the groups that Jesse talked about. This is not my company's strategic plan. This is a strategic plan that belongs to the Kansas City community. So we have, you should have 4 handouts in your packet. If I could ask you, please, the long one that looks like this, okay, for the audience. If you could make that Exhibit A, please. If you could just make that Exhibit A. All right, long one's Exhibit A. The PowerPoint, which is on the screen, if you could make that Exhibit B, please. All right, The one on the screen, make that Exhibit B. Then on the right side of your packet, there's a 36-page full strategic plan version, the one with the young lady on the cover. Make that Exhibit C. We don't have this for the audience members yet. They have the abridged version. Okay, so this Exhibit C, it will be on the district website later on. And then the final document, which everyone should have, if you could make that Exhibit D, please. All right? Thank you. So, if I could ask that you take out Exhibit B, please. Let's start with Exhibit B, the PowerPoint. And as Jesse indicated, this was a community-wide exercise that started about 7 months ago. And what we're doing this evening is to give a formal review of the work that's been done so far. More than 500 people participated since we started. And I'll say more about each one of those stakeholders later on. So let's see. Okay. There are two folks who came from my company, in addition to myself. One of my colleagues, Bill Conrad, Dr. Conrad was also here as a facilitator. And I want to spend just a few seconds to sort of position how we see our role. What a facilitator does is to guide. And a guide does not command or control, but a guide does direct. And we leave it up to the client whether they choose to follow or not. So that's the role we've played throughout, bringing all the diverse voices together to coalesce around a common set of goals. In addition to Bill and myself, I want to give a shout out to one person without whose professional support this wouldn't have happened, and that's Jesse Lang. It took a lot of work to make up something like this come together about 7 months, and Jesse was just really super professional, unflappable. Everything always worked well. The food was always there. The AV worked. And he also had really great old school music. Every meeting, old school songs. So he doesn't get enough. He wasn't expecting this, by the way, but I really want to call out Jesse's contribution to this effort. I'm a facilitator, which means I'm someone with a round-trip ticket. I go home when I'm done. And each time we come here, we're always ready. And Jesse always had things ready for us, and I really want to appreciate him for that. So, outline for this evening, I'd like to start by just giving some highlights of the planning process itself. Spend a big chunk of time walking you through some of the key outcome. That's item number 2 in the strategic plan. Then shift number 3 and 4 to just sharing some ideas about how to implement it. My guess is that in the last 5, 6, maybe 7 years, you've had 4 or 5 plans, all right? So what makes this one different? They're all really fairly similar when you really cut through all the details. What makes one work and a plan work and another plan not work is really item 3. To what extent are we committed to implementing the plan with discipline? That's the most important thing that'll make the difference. If we implement this plan, there's no way it wouldn't work. If we don't implement the plan, there's no way we're going to have any difference. So that item 3, it's really the most important part of my message for this evening. I'll close with some path forward suggestions and some critical success factors. So why plan? We suggest that the primary purpose for planning is alignment, shifting from the arrows on the left to the arrows on the right. Those arrows on the left could represent different people or different processes or different programs. And as you can see, they're going at cross purposes. None of those arrows is a bad arrow. But what makes things really work is when we can align people, processes, programs, everything, and resources to get everything going in the same direction. That is the essence of strategic planning in our view. And to the extent that we can pull this off, not only during the planning phase, but beyond the plan and implementation, there's no way we won't get results. Let me put it to you this way. We have about 2,100 employees in the school district. And I learned that on average, they probably have 10 years of service. So let's just round up to 2,000 employees, 10 years of service on average. So that's 20,000 years of experience within the school district, 20,000 years. So there's a lot of what I call the wisdom of practice. But if we have 20,000 years of experience, all going at cross purposes or not taking time to really align their work, the results we'll get is what we have now. In our school district in Kansas City Public Schools, year after year, only about between 6 and 8 out of every 20 students will pass the state test. And we have about 14 to 15 out of every 20 students graduating on time. So between 6 and 8 out of every 20 are passing, and only about 14 or 15 out of every 20 are graduating on time. There's no reason why that cannot be better with the resources we have, mostly in our folks. If we can really spend a lot of time on the alignment piece, the alignment during the planning phase and the alignment during the implementation phase. So what did we do exactly? If you want alignment, you have to make sure we have all the diverse voices represented. And this slide just shows you the breadth of involvement that we have. I want to highlight a few students. Our very first teams. Our very first session was actually with students. We call it Student Voice. And we met with those students 4 times. About 170 students participated over about 4 or 5 month period. We learned a lot from them. Then the core planning team was the team that consisted of all the stakeholders. There were students on that team, their parents, board members, district level folks, teachers. Think of the core planning team as the team to make sure all the pieces came together. And they spent 5 days, 3 sessions, two-day sessions, and a 1-day session. There was another special group, the instruction focus team, that was mostly teachers and principals and folks from teaching and learning. We had community forums. 4 of them were held over 2 days at 3 different locations in the district. There was the alignment team, the directors. So when we were done, close to 600 folks participated. And I really feel, again, that the plan that's been presented this evening represents the views and the desires of the community as a whole. Okay. So how was the plan structured? These 3 circles show the 3 parts of the plan, but they also show the sequence or the order in which we believe planning should be done. The starting point always has to be outcomes for students. That's circle number 1. And I'll share with you the goals and measures that have been defined for student learning. Once we've defined what we want for students, the next most important thing is what happens when student, teacher, and content come together. It's all about instruction. There are lots of other things we need to put in place, but magic happens or doesn't happen when teacher and student and content come together. So in our schema for planning, we elevate instruction, the quality of instruction, or support for teachers and principals. We place that at a higher level than some of the other things that we feel we need. So that's circle number 2. Circle number 3 is the infrastructure that must be in place to make sure that we have effective instruction in order for teachers to be able to get kids home. Okay. And what I would like to do now is to call your attention to, if I could ask you to take this out, please, the long version. And you can think of this work as ends and means. The ends, the only ends that matter are the outcomes for students, right? So on the top of this page, we have the ends as defined by the board, the mission, vision, and core beliefs. And then the other part of the ends will be the 5 goals that the community has defined for student learning, the goals and measures. Now, ends are attained by means, and the 2 sets of means will be the instructional focus on the left side, and then the infrastructure on the right side, okay? So there's a 36-page report, but these 4 slides pretty much summarize the key outputs from the process. And I'm going to walk you through in some detail what the pieces are. So be thinking of this as ends and means. In this diagram on the screen, the ends will be number 1, circle number 1. The means, which is what the adults have to do to get the kids home, will be circles number 2 and circle number 3. Okay, I want to pause there. Any questions or clarify anything you'd like me to clarify further before we go on, please, at this point? Okay, that's great. Thank you. So, so this is what I'd like to do next is to walk you briefly through each one of the key components. The ends, again, begin with the board's global ends in the policy statement, the mission and vision, the goals and measures. And then the means will be what we call the 4 pillars. I will say more about that later on. The adult practices, the instructional practices, and then also the priorities. So at this point, let me suggest, at least for the board members, if you could please go to page 14 in the Exhibit C, okay? Page 14. The next several slides are really just restatements of what's in the plan. I will have them on the screen as visual cues for you and for the audience. But if you could follow along with on page 14. So starting point will be the end statements as defined by the board. And you can see that it's about high achieving critical thinkers, succeeding in a constantly changing world, and engaged in improving their community. So based on what's in the policy also, this is our vision as a school district. And on the right side is the mission statement. So the vision, again, is primarily about making sure we have students who are prepared to take on the world. Mission is how do we ensure that all students, regardless of their background or circumstances, can actually thrive within our school system and be prepared for success beyond high school. So that's page 14. The last part of page 14 are the core beliefs established by the superintendent. There are 5 of them, and I'm looking to Dr. Bedell if there are any comments or statements you want to make about the 5. Okay.
I mean, we do welcome feedback, but these core beliefs are what I would think helped me to get this job as a part of what I submitted to this board as a part of my application process. And no matter what I do, these 5 core beliefs are things that I 100% value and believe and will stick to.
Great. Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to the goals. All right. Keep in mind that the goals are the outcomes for students. So when we talk about goals in this strategic plan, we don't have a goal around this parent engagement or curriculum and instruction. We don't use the word goal for those. We call those priorities. In setting the goals, we suggest that we emphasize 4 criteria, that the goal has to be uniform for all students. They will get there at different rates, but we shouldn't set different goals for different students. The goal has to take care of the whole child. The goals have to support students through the transition, because often students get lost in the cracks, so to speak, between elementary and middle school, between middle school and high school. So we need to make sure one of the criteria in our goals takes care of the transition from one level to the next. And finally, the 4th criterion we call our fast forward. Some students don't move as fast as other students. How do we make sure we accelerate their progress so that they can still graduate on time? With those 4 criteria in mind, these then are the 5 goals that the community has defined. The first goal, and I'll talk about it, the 2 goals I call the bookends. Goal number 1 is about success in the early years. How do we make sure that all students before they're in the 3rd grade are socio-emotionally ready, and that they also have met the standards for literacy and math before they enter 3rd grade. The second part of the bookend is graduation. So goal 1, get them ready in the early years. Goal number 5, it's about readiness for college, career, and life. And in between goals 1 and 5 are 3 additional goals. One goal is about the whole child. How do we make sure that they're safe, that they're challenged and they're supported? The 3rd goal is about continuous growth for every student so that they can master they can master all subjects. And in the 4th goal, it's really a 21st century skill goal, and it's about having them be critical thinkers and problem solvers. So you can think of these 5 goals again as the 2 bookends: early years, graduation, and then 3 in the middle. So for each one of those 5 goals, we've also defined some specific measures or indicators of progress. You can think of this as the vital signs. So if students are being successful in the early years, what will be the vital signs that will tell us that they're successful? And the Kansas City community defined 3 vital signs or 3 measures. One vital sign of success in early years is that we have more students experiencing high quality preschool program. The second vital sign, again, is that they master literacy and numeracy by the end of 3rd grade. And a 4th vital sign is it's their whole persistence and confidence, the socio-emotional development for students. For I want to highlight goal number 3, which is about continuous growth towards mastery of all subjects. The first vital sign is that we want our students to do well on local, state, and national exams. The second vital sign is that for those students who need extra support, our English learners, our special ed students, and students who require who work with whom the problem-solving teams work, that we are increasing their proficiency rate also. And the final one, which is about a fast forward. I sometimes describe this as we want to raise the ceiling and we want to raise the floor. So I have two daughters who are very, very different. My younger daughter will be one of those really, high flying, even before she was born. And my older daughter, I just struggled. But as a parent, my goal for them and the expectations I have for the two of them was the same. So my high achieving younger daughter, we have to keep her moving forward. But for my older daughter that struggle, we have to move her forward faster so that she can catch up. That's the essence of that third goal. So for all Kansas City students who are already meeting standards, we should expect them to grow 1 year in 1 year, at a minimum. And for the students who are not yet at grade level, the gentleman who spoke first was talking about that in a sense, that we want to make sure that those students who are not yet at grade level are getting at least 1.5 years growth in 1 year, and that's where they're going to catch up, all right? And the other three goals, which I wouldn't touch on, they have similar measures, so that the 5 goals and 3 indicators of progress or 3 vital signs for each of the goals. And these are the things that will form the basis of the dashboard, which the superintendent can share with the board on a periodic basis. Okay. So with that, I've just touched on really the highlights of the ends part. Now we want to switch to the means. Again, ends have to be attained through means. And there are 3 parts to that I want to touch on. The first one will be to define the skeletal structure for our house. We've just defined what we want for students. If we want our students to get there, imagine if we were to build a house that will nurture those students and the adults in that house. And we could build a house on only 4 foundations. On what 4 foundations we will build a house? That's the idea here. Think of the goals as the outcomes we want, and then think of the pillars as the superstructure for our educational house to make sure that all kids can be successful. And there are 4 pillars that have been selected, each one of them meeting a particular criterion. The first foundation of our house, I'm going to imagine this is the first pillar for the house. It's about teaching and learning. And the label for Kansas City is personalized, rigorous, culturally responsive teaching and learning. But the essence of that pillar is about teaching and learning. The second pillar is about schools can't do it alone. It recognizes that we need more than just the schools to get the kids home. The official label that the planning teams came up with will be safe climate and strong relationships with parents and with families and community. But again, the essence of it is a recognition that schools can't do it alone. The third pillar of our house is about investing in people. How do we support all of our staff, all of our teachers, all of our leaders at all levels so that they can become the best in their own craft? Okay, so that's pillar number 3. And the fourth foundation of our house is about managing a whole. Think of this foundation, this fourth one, as like it's the conduct of the orchestra. You have a lot of people playing different instruments. Sometimes you need someone to make sure all the pieces come together so you can make a really beautiful sound. So these 4 ideas then really frame what our house, our educational house is. 1 foundation for teaching and learning, 1 foundation for schools can't do it alone, 1 foundation for investing in people, and 1 for managing the whole. So moving forward then, all of our work is really about making each one of these 4 pillars very strong. And we want them to be strong at 2 levels. We want them to be strong at the level of instruction, what happens in a classroom, or at a school level. We also want them to be strong when it comes to the infrastructure to support instruction. You may recall the 3 circles I described at the beginning. So we're now looking at circle number 2 and circle number 3. The goals for circle number 1. So what I want to do now is just to highlight some of the circle number 1. If I could ask you, please, the board to go to page 16. Where the Kansas City folks have defined some specific professional practices, the things that teachers will do well in order for kids to improve, the things that need to happen around leadership in order for schools to thrive, and the things that need to happen at the organizational level in order for us to get home. So that's what the essence of page 16 is. What are the teaching practices? What are the leadership practices? And what are the organizational practices that will get all kids home? The second part of what we have to do well, it's about the infrastructure to support instruction. And that infrastructure is built around 12 priorities, which are represented by 4 quadrants. So the first quadrant, we define 3 priorities: having student-centered caring relationships, having instruction that's an instruction system that's aligned to the outcomes, and then making sure we have personalized instruction and also transitional support for students. So those are 3 things to do well. Under the schools can't do it alone, it's about safety nets for students and families. It's about family engagement and communication, and it's also about community partnerships. So those are the 3 things we want to get really good at. Under investing in people, it's about attracting, developing, and retaining the best folks we can find. It's about developing those folks through professional development and collaboration. That's the 8 o'clock the hand. And it's about making sure we have leaders at all levels that are capable and empowered. So far we've covered 3 of the 4 pillars. We have 3 priorities around instruction. We have 3 priorities around family and community engagement. We have 3 priorities around capacity building for our folks. And what we need as the 4th one is something to help us manage all of those pieces. This is that conductor of the orchestra again. And the participants identified 3 key priorities for making sure all the pieces come together. The first one, it's about, this is on page 17, by the way, in your handout. First one is about results-focused planning, accountability, and celebrations. We really feel celebrations are very important. Everyone works really hard. And in this profession, we tend to be rushing to the next thing that needs to be fixed. We really want to urge you to take time to make sure we celebrate the progress we're making. Even though we're not home yet, it's very important to you. We call it nurturing the heart, to make sure we nurture the heart along the way. 11 o'clock is about equitable resources. Equity is fundamentally about making sure we give each student or each school what they need to move the kids or the school to the next level. Equity and equality are 2 different things. Giving everyone the same thing, it's not the way to go. Back again to my own 2 daughters. What my younger daughter needed, the faster moving one, was very different from what our older sister needed. So resources have to be applied equitably, not equally, relative to the goals. And then finally, this is one of the favorites of the superintendent, this notion of customer excellence. How do we have a responsive customer service, especially at the district level and also at the front office in our buildings? So that's really, that pretty much summarizes the, we just took flight, okay. That summarizes the recommendations before shifting to what we must do to ensure success. Let me just ask you to go to page 18, please. I'm going to go back and bring the bird back, okay? On page 18 and 19 are some very specific key actions. Up to this point, I've talked about the structure, the goals, the pillars, etc. From page 18 to about page 25 are the specific things we need to do. And for the audience, this is one example. So for the priority number 1, a very specific key action is the one that's on the screen. I'd like to just pause for a minute or 2, if I could ask the board members to just browse through page 18 through 25, so you get a feel for the nature of those recommendations, and I'll take your questions before I go to the last part of my presentation. So I'll check in again about a minute or 2. Again, pages 18 through 25. Any questions or comments, please, at this point? Yes, please.
I should know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I participated, and remind me, when I was reading through this prior to the, each section, was this the part where the core group came up with the key actions?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, it was.
okay.
Yep.
And then one other, apologies, Chairman Robinson. The master plan, because I see it, that was my thing, was checking. Did that come after I see some little denotations. Did
Yes.
you guys add those after?
It came after. What we did with the master plan, well, after the core planning team was done, we felt that there are some really excellent ideas in the master plan that are not fully implemented yet. So with Jesse's help, we went through and identified those things not yet completed, and we make sure they're part of this document. Yeah. Any other questions,
I
please?
did have a follow-up to that in
Yes,
terms
please.
of the methodology. You said you went through, and so was that a comprehensive look through to make sure? Because I think the part that, it was only a couple asterisks.
Correct.
Less than 5.
Yeah, there
And
were like
so-
only about 3. And I'm going to
Right.
defer to Jesse also. Is Jesse still here?
So we just want to make sure that we're intentional in communicating to the public that we're honoring the decisions that we made through the master plan, and we're communicating how it is being encompassed in our strategic plan.
Yes, we thought about that a couple different ways. So some of the working groups, when they were originally doing the key actions, they had the list from the master plan, and so some of them, specifically called out items that they wanted to be included, but not every group got to that point in the core planning team. So when we looked at it afterwards, there were a lot of key actions that got to the spirit of what we were trying to say in the master plan, not the exact wording. So if it wasn't the exact wording, we pulled the ones that needed the wording to go in here. For example, the key action 3.7, talking about reduced class size for the lower grades, we didn't have that exact wording anywhere, so we wanted to make sure that that was specifically called out in the strategic plan.
Yes, okay, and just one follow-up, why wouldn't we just denote all the things? Like, why wouldn't we put the asterisk by all of the items that were represented in the master plan?
We can absolutely do that. We can add it to
Okay.
every one that gets to
Okay.
the spirit of what was in the master plan.
Okay. Ms. Manter?
I think that was the question I had. I looked at the master plan, I set it next to this document in advance of this meeting. Even though some of the language is not identical, there are elements in the master plan that might fully support the safe learning environments or some of those elements. So they are, it is not difficult to match. And I think for that very large public
Yes.
participated both in
Yes.
this, but
Yes.
the very large public that participated in the master plan.
Correct.
I think that that facility's master plan sort of undergirds in
Yeah.
many ways. You talk about the pillars, but it also helps set a foundation for this good work that
Excellent. Yeah. That's a great idea. It'd be nice to make them explicit rather than implicit. And I think we can go back and look line by line in the master plan and do what you just suggested. It's great. Any other questions before we go on, please? Yes.
First of all, very good job, very thorough.
Thank you.
So if I kind of understand this correctly, and I guess for me, I'll use the summary poster. If I look at the pillars, as you said, that's the means, that's the how-to,
That's
that's
correct.
the action.
Yes.
And if those things are, occur, then the outcomes should be
The results for the
success
students.
in early years, whole child, et cetera.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
Okay. I think, just some suggestions, and I don't know if the layout is final, but I really like in the book, pages 18 moving forward. I think that does a good job of explaining the actions and maybe just from a formatting standpoint, if you had below just a reminder of the 5 goals. That way then the reader can see, okay, here's the action, but ultimately, here's what the final destination.
Okay.
But again, very
Yeah.
thorough, very good job,
Thank
and
you.
I understand it, but just my comments are more from a formatting standpoint.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. Okay. So if I could do if we can go to the last part now, and that's really about implementation. And I want to start with this slide, which what we've done so far is we've planned the work. The successful districts work the plan. The ones that don't work the plan are the ones that don't make it. The ideas are really solid. They're really solid. But where most districts fall apart again is in working the plan. And I suggest here that dreams wouldn't work unless you do. So what we have on paper in this plan is a statement of our dreams, our aspirations, our hopes for all of our students. Now we have to really work that plan. And I can guarantee you that, when we work this, there's no way there will be that we won't get results. And the converse is also true. If we don't work it, we're going to come back 2-3 years from now and we think we need another plan. It is not the plan. It's really about working the plan from this point forward. And a couple of things, this process, which is on page 26 of your document, outlines a way of thinking about how we implement the plan so we can have sustainable results. We need to set very clear goals. We need to have detailed plans. We need to monitor those plans and celebrate progress. And just those 4 ideas will really carry us through in terms of the implementation of the plan. There are 2 crucial, I call them habits intentionally. A habit is something that you do repetitively. And it's sort of like making a New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose weight or gain weight or whatever. You do it for a while, you get results. When you don't do it, you're going to fall back. You do it again, you're going to get results, you're going to fall back. So this idea of disciplined implementation is really all it takes. Again, ideas are solid. We have over 20,000 years of experience in our school district. If we can mobilize even just a fraction of the 20,000 years of experience, we will make really huge gains for kids. And so that's where discipline comes in. And as an example of a dashboard from one of the other clients we have, the board has requested this in the past, and I would suggest that this be one of the very first things that we get done. How are we going to keep score? What are we going to track exactly? What are we going to track at the district level, at the school level, and maybe even further down the line at the classroom level? And in thinking about how to create a dashboard, most people's dashboard only focus on the outcomes for students. That's laudable, but it's actually not enough. Because what we want for students are the ends, but ends are attained through means. So if you don't pay attention to the means, by the time the ends show up, it's too late, all right? The horse has already left the barn, so to speak. So I'm actually suggesting, rather, lovingly but strongly, that the bias ought to be on tracking adult practices. Because if the adult practices, the teaching practices, the leadership practices and the organizational practices are solid, the kids will do well. If those practices are not solid, we know what we're going to get with the kids. So it's not one or the other. But for my money, and I think it's common sense also, that if we get our teachers to move their practice up, and if we get our leadership to move their practice up, and if as a community and the district we get the practice up, the kids will be fine. There's nothing wrong with the kids. It's the adult practices that we need to really get in line. When we do that, student learning will go up. So the kind of dashboard that we recommend is one that actually does all 4. Imagine one view of the dashboard being about the outcomes for kids. This is you notice the 5 goals. We have some specific metrics. There could be those in the strategic plan, but you can also have some interim ones as well. And we can now turn this into a dashboard, things we can track. For teaching practices, this is just a starting point. We have a meeting with the cabinet tomorrow to think about what are the things that would tell us that the teaching practices are going well. The format that I've presented is the Charlotte Danielson's 4 domains. Planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction. Imagine if we could really know how every teacher and every classroom is doing on these. If the adult practices are fine, the kids are fine. If the adult practices are not fine, the kids are not fine. Right? So really focusing on means and supporting our folks with high quality PD is the way to get there, to get the kids home. Same thing with leadership practices. These are some starting points based on the ISLIC standards for leaders. These are some national standards. We can devise some local ones also, but it's the same idea. What would be the leadership practices that we want to monitor over time? And then the same thing for the organizational practices, which will include district level metrics, but also parent, community, etc. Okay. So this is work in progress, but the main point I want to make is the idea of making sure that we track not just the student learning information, but also the adult practices. And then finally, I'm going to go through the last few slides quickly. I'm going to skip some of these. The implementation at the school level, in order to make sure it's disciplined, we need to get clear, what do we have to do at the start of the school year? What do we do every week? What do we do every month? What do we do every 6 to 12 weeks when we have some student data? What do we do at mid-year and end of year? And we can now begin to plan our work in this way. Schools can have their own calendar. Departments can have their own calendar. The cabinet, in fact, this one has started already. We started last week. And we're meeting already. The cabinet has already gone through the strategic plan to identify who's going to take the lead on what, and they're developing annual action plan already. And we continue that work tomorrow. It's more than half of the way home. And the same thing at the board level. One suggestion we make is for the board to require the superintendent to make 3 presentations a year, trimester report of progress. And for the board itself to engage in a data summit. One of our clients, Highline School District outside of Seattle, they will do this on Saturdays for a whole day, 3 times during the school year, really diving into what's going on at the school level, what's going on at the district level, so that they're much better informed and they can support the schools, and also ask the tough questions that maybe districts that might be overlooking. So you notice that on the left-hand side is the same thing for everyone, but the calendar will need to flex to the needs of each group. So in closing, I want to talk about, this. I don't think I have this slide in your presentation. I thought of it after I was on my flight from Oakland. And it's about how to avoid spots. And what SPOT stands for? SPOT stands for Strategic Plan on Top Shelf Gathering Dust. Okay? It's a very common illness. All right. So if we don't want the plan to be on top shelf, gathering dust, fancy folder, fancy 3-ring binder, beautiful colors and so on, we have to follow through on implementation. And when we do that, there's no way we won't get the results. And, finally, the path forward, some very specific suggestions for the near term. Think of this as the next 3 months. We recommend that the board and the superintendent set some broad priorities for the district for the upcoming school year, that the cabinet develops its plan. Again, it started a week ago. It continues tomorrow. And through that, we create a dashboard. What gets measured and rewarded gets done. So that's the reason why the dashboard is really key. The moment Dr. Bedell is very clear about the details in that will measure, the easier. And you can read the rest of it. And so in closing, I'll say we cannot be totally committed sometimes. We need to just commit. We need to decide out this is something we're going to do and then, get on with it. Thank you very much.
All right. Mr. Fierro.
Question, and I probably should have maybe asked this about 20 minutes ago, but in looking at the goals and measures, so certainly you talked about the aggressive community engagement process, and I've heard from a lot of stakeholders that they felt very good about being engaged. I guess my question would be, in terms of the 5 goals, what was the level of input when it came to the financial sustainability of the district? And I guess my second part of that question, in your experience in working with school districts around the country, do they typically have a goal related to that? And what's your observation of why our local group maybe
Yes.
didn't insist that that be a goal?
Great. Partly because of the way we define goal, we suggest that the word goal be reserved just for kids. Now, under the priorities, which are the things we have to do well, one of those is the financial piece, facilities, technology, curriculum, and so on. That's why we call out what we need to do around the financial piece. But the goal, if you look at the way we've used the goal here, you wouldn't see a single adult mention. You won't see anything about what the adults have to do. It's all about the outcomes for kids. Now, as I reflect now on the 12 priorities, I don't think we've been as explicit as you might be suggesting when it comes to the financial part. So that could be something we need to take a second look at. Yeah,
Would recommend that.
okay, thank you. Now, if I could just kind of clarify, I think we need to build the recommendation into the plan, and then it gets implemented subsequent to board adoption of the plan. But it's not really strong yet, and I think that we can build that in. Thank you.
Board Member Lewis.
Thank you. I commend Dr. Bedell and the board and you, sir, that I still can't pronounce your name properly, so I'm sorry.
That's all right. That'll be a test afterwards.
Just for even getting this far, especially within your first year, Dr. Bedell, at the level that we did. I do have some wonders as far as to avoid the spots situation, and I wonder how other cities have done it. There is one thing, it says getting things done well demands discipline. It also demands the stability. I mean, there's a certain
Yes.
landscape of Kansas City. And for this not to just be a generic plan where we went out like we were starting from scratch and how would you create a great district, it really, really has to, and for this to be a working plan for us, it has to factor in the history of the district, the landscape of the city, the fact that we're in a charter, I mean, just all those pieces. So I hope that there's a plan somewhere to those barriers in, because part of this achieving these things and the key action items don't necessarily outline
Yeah.
the barriers.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to come up with strategies and come up with action items without fully me seeing what we think the barriers
Correct.
are in that piece. The other piece is it also requires funds. We just talked about a $5 million drop. I always want to know how much does this cost?
Yes.
Because I promise you, it does not cost our budget. So I always yearn to know, as we are approving budgets and approving things, how do we know what we can and can't afford to do? The other piece is that equity. We talked about equity, equity, equity. I don't see that language layered in nearly as much. I don't see the systemic racism and the system, all those issues and redlining and all that is critical to a teacher being able to relate to a student, all that cultural piece. I don't see that layered in there, so I don't know how we layer that in there. And then the last thing is if it costs more than we can afford,
Yeah.
and go back to that, without me knowing, if it costs more than we can afford, where are we gonna go and get the rest of that money? And that's that's through partnerships, through the grant, I mean, just how do we do that? And it may not be a dollar check. We have many, many people coming because of the wonderful work over the last year and Dr. Bedell working the way he has. There are people wanting to know, how do I help? So based on this document and framing up what needs to be done, we should be able to say, okay, we won't have the dollar to do that,
Yeah.
but we have a group of people saying, here's how you can help,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. My other thought is, and I was happy to know that, I want to know, where are we now? Like, where are we starting? And I know that there was a lot of data looked at as far as the state of student achievement and where we are. I would love to get that.
Great.
But because of that, I don't know how to say what equity looks like. If I had to approve a budget tomorrow, I don't know if it's distributed equitably, because I don't know which students are further off,
Got
where
it.
the greatest need, all that stuff.
Got it.
The fact that we have progress, I hope that there's some other steps. And I know, one last thing, I know with measures, there are kind of indicators.
Correct.
And then And there's another step in there
Which is
that
setting
we
real
set
targets.
targets.
Exactly.
So that they're
Yeah.
specific for a year. So just almost a timeline on when do we have to set those targets? And would that be based on building level analysis?
Yeah.
Set those targets. So,
Okay.
you have your job, Dr. Bell, and I
Thank you.
don't. But it's just, on paper.
Great, that's great. If I could just respond quickly to some of your comments. Everything comes
Very quickly.
very quick. Okay, everything comes back into the implementation piece. Now, this is the strategic framework. The next thing is the implementation plan. How exactly are we going to do this? I will suggest that do it for maybe a year or 2 years. Don't try to think it out through 5 years. It's just too far out. But having a first year detailed implementation plan makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you very much.
Board Member Wolfsey and then Mansur.
Okay, thank you so much. It was actually a fun part of the process, as I've been through many of these. This one was a good one. I think my question actually is more to you, Dr. Bedell. So it's number 46, the slide, it's page 23, and here. So, oh, it's the one Matuyu has up. 4 and 5. So can you explain to me how, how if I'm a principal, I assume my part kind of comes in 5, I think, like if I'm a principal, can you just walk me through, if once it's approved, how this then impacts what I do at the school level?
Yeah, it's pretty. This process that we're probably 95 to 98% complete, other than just a few recommendations that we believe we will receive that we're hearing now for questions. And so, look, knowing that what we know what the goals are, my job then is to come in and to give staff an overview. I've already scheduled that for the principals. I've already scheduled an overview for all central office employees. Everybody in here will get the same thing that our principals will get, and then eventually principals will then bring that back to their campus. But the way that you tie all of this in together is, I want to say next Thursday and Friday, we will actually have a facilitator here that will be working directly with our principals on their school improvement plans. And the alignment of what is going to come about in this strategic plan will have direct alignment with how they are going to build their school improvement plans. And so I've already spoken with the facilitator. And one of the things I said to the facilitator was I wanted to have an opportunity to submit this document because, initially we were looking to have the board to vote on it this week, but we know with the loss of the previous board meeting, we have to postpone. But then she would, in her presentation, tie in the process based on what we have in here with the goals and the various pillars that exist. But what we wanted to do, just like this is a 35-page document or so, not a 400-page document, we want to also replicate this same process with our principals so that their school improvement plans are tight and aligned, and then you're focusing on moving the needle academically, looking at reading, looking at math, whatever the other data points are. But then that third goal is something focusing on culture and climate. And that could be behavior, that could be suspension reduction, that could be graduation rates, attendance rates. It could be doing a student survey at the end of the year based on relationship building. So we wanted to keep it very tight, just like this plan. And then they're going to be evaluated based on how they perform. And when you talked about it not collecting dust, we know that my evaluation will be tied in to the progress that's being made towards these measurable goals, which is what it should be. And then that trickles down directly to these executive staff members and then down to the people that they supervise. So this will not collect dust. I can assure the community of that. We didn't waste all of this time and the resources to just have a pretty plan. So I just want to make sure that I made that.
So if I'm a parent at one of the schools, I should be able to literally look at this at a district level, and then even, and I don't know that we've ever done this in the past. I have seen school improvement plans, mainly for schools that had to have them title schools. All schools didn't always have to, but I assume now, I don't know that we will all have them. I should be able to tie the two and see the links between the two as a parent.
100%. You should be able to see that, and it may be different for schools based on where they are. So, but there will be alignment to this plan in the school improvement plans.
Ms. Manser?
I'll keep my questions to one. But I think one of the things you commented about is you said that there are these teaching practices and then these building practices, et cetera, and you had that chart that you showed on that. To what extent then, just, you may have said it, but just to help me, Dr. Bedell, to what extent are teachers, not just central office individuals or cabinet individuals, but to what extent are teachers and a broad set of building leaders going to participate in designing the practices based on the interpretation of this?
You to clarify that for me so I can make sure I'm giving you the correct answer.
See he has this chart, so there's these teaching practices view, and so that this would, I suppose this is the interpretation, this is how that teaching practices, what you would see
Correct.
from the teacher. So I want to know to what extent will some group of teachers be part of devising how that looks, so that it's not central office driven, I guess.
Well, I think if you look at the teaching practices that fall under each of the pillars, to me, that's part of what site-based management, why site-based management makes sense. You allow the principal to work directly with their staffs in order to make sure that these teaching practices are taking place. And I think that you customize it based on where schools are, where teachers are, because they are all on a different level. But I 100% would tell you that's not for us to come in and just dictate that you're going to do these things. But this is the plan, and this is what we do expect to see. Now, this is the what. How you go about doing it really needs to be left up to the intelligence and the autonomy of the building principal working directly with their teachers. Yeah, and I understand, and Trinity just said this was part of what teachers did. Teachers were the ones that
teachers,
actually came up with these practices.
Those teachers.
I just want to make sure that if there's any deviation from our commitment to, building out a scorecard at the time that we approve this, so that we're really clear about what those measures are going to be. If our method is different now, where we need more time to do that we're aware of that, because I know that was an essential part of what we've communicated as a board that we wanted to see before approval, so that we could understand what at least year one looked like in terms of metrics. So.
And I know we're meeting tomorrow to go over some of that, so we can make sure that we realistically provide you with a timeline. It is my hope that we could have that core scorecard done at least for year one, and have that available for view, because to me that's what's critical, is everybody having a solid understanding that if we finished off this school year at a projected, I heard 72% graduation rate possibly, somewhere in that range. So then where do we go from 72%? We were at 68 last year. We want to move now from 72, so part of that scorecard would be 72 to 75 or 76, whatever it may be, and having that information available.
Yes, Mr. Oates?
Where will this be available for public consumption after it's approved?
Well, we know it will be available on the website. We also know, so the full plan, but we also have a 4-pager that will be available to be dispersed out to schools, to go home with parents. And what I'm also we'll talk about some other marketing strategies of this later.
Okay.
Thank you so very much for your
Thank you very much.
presentation,
I
and thank
appreciate
you
it.
for.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the products. Okay, Dr. Bell, you have a couple other items?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. This one will be very quick. It's just to come up and provide a conversation just around the exploration of Lincoln Middle School, and that was something that we also know was discussed in the master plan over the past year and a half prior to me coming. So we just want to inform the community about our intentions with that.
It's basically just an update over some of the work that's taken place recently, as well as work that's scheduled to take place in the future regarding the expansion of Lincoln Prep and the potential or the possibility of reopening Lincoln Middle. Sorry, I forgot my thing to drive. Just to go over some work that's happened in the past. So in 2015, in the fall of 2015, Lincoln Middle Advisory Committee convened. That was made up of, parents, teachers, administrators, that took part in that. We met for 2 months weekly, and that group really did a lot of great work. I've recently been looking through some of the work that group has done. And so the recommendations that were made by that group in 2015 were then rolled into the master plan in 2016, which is actually part of that big packet that you had of all that backup information for the master plan. All of the information from the advisory committee was included in that. As we've continued now with our timeline, this school year and last school year, we had some very serious space limitations at Lincoln Prep, which is a wonderful problem to have. It's a great school, very prestigious. It's been ranked high again this year, and so we know a lot of kids want to get in there. Last year, the building had 99% building utilization. We talked about utilization before at different times, and we've never had schools like that, so that's a great problem at Lincoln, but that's why we want to explore expansion at this time. So just to let the board know and the community in general, we have set up a couple meeting dates to talk with Lincoln parents about the possibility of reopening the middle school as well as alternatives too. So there's 2 meetings that are scheduled next week. One's on Monday night for those who live in the southern portion of the district. It's going to be held at Troost Elementary School. The next night on Tuesday, we'll be meeting at Manual for parents that live in the north part of the district. And both of those meetings are open to not only Lincoln parents, which were invited, but also we invited every parent of a PK through 6 child, because that's a potential attender of Lincoln one day. So they were invited to those meetings as well. So we're going to gather feedback, talk to folks, and lay out some different scenarios and see how they feel about this. Come back on August 3rd, have a follow-up meeting based upon what we've heard before school starts. So we'll do that follow-up meeting at Lincoln Prep, and we'll also be able to engage families. It's kind of a nice opportunity at Summerfest when everybody will be together on August 5th. We can continue this conversation to continue to talk about this potential. What's happening internally is we've created some working groups that have been working through various tasks. We know that we have briefed the board previously, and you all created a lot of great questions that we had talked about as internal staff as well. We've also been fielding questions already from parents who echo the exact same thoughts that you all have. So we're working to address those questions, as well as others that are going to come out from that engagement that hasn't occurred yet that'll start next week. So we've started talking to folks right after the communication went out on June 30th. We already started fielding questions about the potential. So these working groups over the last couple of months have been really trying to get in gear to make sure we have the right information available to you, which we will bring back to the board in August. Are there any questions? Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield.
Yes, I guess I have a few questions. I need to go back to when you talk about the master plan. When did we open up our 2 middle schools?
This is our 4th year for having our middle schools. Is that correct? So.
And this is our 4th year.
2013.
Both of those are under capacity, correct? Both of those are under capacity.
Currently, Northeast Middle is it's under capacity, but the building utilization is within the desired range.
Right.
Central middle is below that desired
Okay.
range.
I guess my question is, once again, one of the things that a lot of persons that I've spoke with continuously ask me about is our two-tier system within our district. And, you know, we're talking about now a middle school at Lincoln when we have two schools that we have not been able to bring up academically or numerically to what they should be. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned that we have available seats at our middle school, we have available seats at our high school, but we're seeking to do only expansion at Lincoln. I think we're promoting what many of our constituents are talking about, is this two-tier system that we have where we are not putting our resources and developing where there's space and many students. And I'm just a little concerned about our focus and why. So maybe I'm asking the why question. Why Lincoln when we still have space, both middle and high?
Well, let me answer that question, and I'll be very clear as possible, Dr. Hartsfield. We're in a situation where, while I'm thinking about the overall educational landscape, school district, I'm thinking about what type of leverage we have. I'm looking at data. I'm looking at this point, Lincoln High School, we're turning kids away, in particular because we don't have the space in that building because 300 of those seats are being taken up by middle school kids when we have a middle school across the street. I am also thinking about other factors, and it's tough to say this, but when we talk about some of the internal factors, you have central middle, and I will continuously say this, you have neighborhood factors that are beyond our control. I've said this to the mayor, that actually works against us. So even if the school is an exemplary school, you're still going to have parents that may not necessarily want to send their kids over there because of factors that are beyond the control of our school district. So in the meanwhile, we're turning a ton of kids away because we do have a leverage point that I think as a superintendent, we simply have not taken advantage of. And when you look at our data, a ton of our kids that are in grades 4 and 5 are leaving, and not only are they leaving, multiple kids are leaving with those, multiple siblings are leaving with those kids. And so if we were to explore this possibility of Lincoln Middle, knowing that there's a tremendous amount of interest, and to be able to say that we could even look at the standards in terms of entry for those kids at Lincoln Middle School to ensure that we could fill those seats and give more kids an opportunity, whether they're great testers or not. We feel like it's a leverage point right now. The alternative is to say, okay, at this point, we know we have this leverage point, but we don't try to explore to at least see what the possibilities are. Then we continue to have a decline in enrollment because there are some variables that are beyond our control until we get additional support from the community, from the mayor's office, from politicians, whoever we want to really speak to on that. So I just want to be in a situation where we can stabilize the decline in enrollment, but I also know that we have to provide an equitable educational program for all of our kids across the district, and I feel like a lot of things that we've done this year speaks to us doing that, but we also have to think about the future of the district moving forward and what leverage points do we have right now to potentially slow some of the charter movement, because it will not slow down.
Thank you for starting the conversation and opening up the dialogue. This presentation was meant for informational purposes. We will be having additional dialogue about this where we can work through some of the conversation and just a workshop around this decision. Can you just hold on one second? I'm going to go to Ms. Wolfsey. She has a question, and then we'll come back. Okay, yes.
And I'm actually not going to make my points now, but what I do want to do is, I also have been going back through the memo, and I do think we need to get this back out to the board. There is some very important information. These are the recommendations made. I have, full disclosure, I was one of the parents on the middle school steering committee when we did talk about this. And I think this is important for this board to read through before we have this conversation. It is the Lincoln Middle School recommendations. The date is November 3rd, 2015, and we need to read this before we have this.
Is that something you could provide in the Friday packet, in the update? And then also, is there a way for as well that to be made available to the public as we're engaging the public in the conversation through the website? Okay. Mr. Oates, and then we'll come back around.
Just trying to get a point on process here. So we say we're going to report out recommendations to the board on August 2017. So this will be a final-ish recommendation, and from there we would be asked to take action on it at what point?
The idea would be the board would take action on August 23rd. So we'd present information at the first board meeting in August, and then ask to take action at the second.
And there is going to be an interim board discussion about this, right? Where we're allocating some significant time to go through all of our questions and concerns.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Manser and then Ms. Hartsfield. Yes. Okay. Dr. Hartsfield.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, insert a geographical piece. Lincoln and Central are less than a mile apart. They sit within the same neighborhood. It's not so much a geographical place that is a difficulty that Lincoln has. It's the standard of education. So I think we have to be sure that we're not talking about it's just the place, the locality. I can walk from Lincoln to Central. It's a difference in programming.
Okay. Next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jesse. At this time, we wanted to close out the superintendent's report. As you know, we've made some changes to our business meeting where we will provide a video highlight. So we wanted to provide a highlight on our commencements.
The 2017 commencement season was an outstanding resolution to a great academic year for Kansas City Public Schools. Superintendent Mark Bedell and his staff are proud of the class of 2017 and excited to share their achievements with the entire Kansas City community. Our 2017 graduation ceremonies demonstrate that we are moving forward together. Each of the 7 commencement ceremonies held in 2017 showcased remarkable scholars led by talented and dedicated teams of educators.
Don't underestimate your work by comparing yourself with others. It is because we are different that each of us is special. Don't set your goals by what other people are getting important. Only you know what is best for you. Don't give up when you still have something to give. Nothing is really over until the moment you stop trying.
Graduation Week launched with the 146 members of East High School's class of 2017 marching on Monday afternoon, May 15th. The 2017 East Bears received over 180 university acceptance letters from 22 different institutions across the Midwest and nation, including the Missouri University of Science and Technology, Kansas State University, and the University of Central Missouri. The class earned more than $850,000 in scholarship aid. 27 graduates successfully completed Missouri's A+ program, and 16 qualified for the National Honor Society. The Vikings class of 2017 will be attending 10 colleges and universities, including Metropolitan Community College, UMKC, and Northwest Missouri State University. Northeast graduates earned almost $650,000 in total college financial aid awards this year. The class included 34 students who completed the A+ program and 30 National Honor Society members. "51 colleges and universities sent 136 letters of acceptance to the 2017 Central Eagles, including the University of Missouri, K-State, and Lincoln University. The class earned about $870,000 in financial aid awards. 30 students completed the Jobs for America's Graduates program. The Knights boasted 117 graduates who are headed to 25 different colleges and universities. Some prominent examples include Howard University, Morehouse College, and the UMKC Institute of Urban Education. These graduates earned $2,121,000 in financial aid awards. This year's manual tech class included 175 seniors from all 6 KCPS high schools who earned CTE diplomas in automotive collision repair, automotive technology, broadcast television, construction technology, C++ and Java programming, culinary arts, healthcare services, EMT services, fashion and costume design, and pre-engineering. The class of 2017 earned more than $16 million in college grants and scholarships. By mid-May, 138 Lincoln Prep graduates had made final decisions about where to attend college or university. Some outstanding examples include Loyola University in Chicago, Boston University, and the Georgia Institute of Technology. The Paseo Academy class of 2017 earned $5 million in college scholarships and grants. The graduates will be attending 14 different schools, including Mizzou, KU, and Truman State University. 14 Paseo graduates successfully completed the Pylons Honors Program. 20 graduates were members of the National Honor Society. The KCPS Missouri Option Program celebrated its first ever graduation and awards ceremony. Every one of these young people overcame huge challenges and stayed focused on their long-term goals in order to earn their diplomas. They truly embody the pride of Team KCPS. All told, about 700 KCPS students earned their high school diplomas and crossed the threshold to their new lives as young adults during the 2017 commencement season. We also want to express our deep gratitude for every member of Team KCPS who helped guide and support these students on their journey to graduation. They work hard every day, and our graduates are living proof that their work is valuable.
I would definitely say for anyone coming to high school and becoming seniors, don't forget what you came to school for. Everyone else can warp your idea of what it means to be in high school and to graduate. Come here for you. Be who you are and stay who you are. Stay true to yourself, and no matter what, don't ever give up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. We do have quite a few items as we have combined our June business items and July business items. Thank you for your patience with us this evening. Item 3.01, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I will have our Chief Financial Operations Officer, Linda Quinley, to come up and present on this U.S. Foods contract.
Thank you.
Welcome to Kansas City, and please,
Thank you.
Please, if you want to say a few words about yourself and where you came from, that would be great.
I am delighted to be here with you tonight for my first board meeting. 7 days in, I fresh out of Columbia as of June 30th and started here on July 3rd. It's been a great transition. Everyone's been so welcoming. I'm really excited to be here. So we have for you this evening a request for approval of the recommendation to make final authorization for our agreement with U.S. Foods. They are our largest provider of food, general supplies, and chemicals. This is an annual agreement worth $4.9 million.
Regarding the approval of the final renewal agreement with U.S. Foods, it would be in order to have a motion to approve this proposal.
I move to approve item number 017S006-213 U.S. Foods C14002 in the amount of $4.9 million.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the final renewal agreement with U.S. Foods for the supply and delivery of food, general supplies, and chemicals in the amount of $4,900,000. Is there any debate on the motion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Will the secretary call the roll?
Miss Manser,
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey,
Yes.
Miss Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro, Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield,
Yes.
and Miss Robinson.
Yes, this is a majority vote in favor, and the agreement with U.S. Foods is approved. Item number 3.02, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Right at this time, I'll have Aaron Thompson to come up and present on the Kansas City Public School Retirement System payment.
Good evening. This is our annual payment of our retirement benefit that comes out of every year at December. The Board of Public Retirement, School Retirement requests this payment of the $9,586,293.
Are there any questions regarding accepting the resolution from the Public School Retirement System for the employee match contribution? It will now be in order to receive a motion to approve this proposal.
So moved.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to accept the resolution from the Public School Retirement System for the employee match contribution. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Miss Manser,
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey,
Yes.
Miss Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro, Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Miss Robinson.
Yes, there's a majority in the favor of the resolution from the Public School Retirement System is accepted. Item 3.03, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Aaron Thompson will present this proposal on the amendment. I think it's Amendment 2.
Yes, it's Amendment 2 of the budget. This is closing out our financial year. It's an increase of $2.5 million. Our Amendment 1 budget was $237,827,539. Okay. And we're requesting our budget to be increased to $240,388,496, which is an increase of $2.5 million. The increase is basically due to link payment of $480,000. We had substitute increase in costs, student transportation $360,000, legal judgments against the district of $512,000, and we accepted a SIG grant for East for $240,000. So it's basically to close out the fiscal year.
Are there any questions regarding the proposed Amendment 2 to fiscal year 17 comprehensive budget? It will now be in order to receive a motion to approve this proposal.
Move to approve this proposal.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the Amendment 2 to the fiscal year 17 comprehensive budget as indicated in the agenda. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. Will the secretary call the roll?
Miss Manser,
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey,
Yes.
Miss Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield,
Yes.
and Miss Robinson.
Yes, there's a majority in favor, and the Amendment 2 of the fiscal year 17 comprehensive budget is approved. Item 3.04, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, we'll have Ms. Quinley to come up to present to the board our request for you to take action on the Transpower Group Incorporation.
Thank you. And we wanted to start with a presentation on transportation overall. But before I do that, I wanted to recognize a couple of people. Mr. Nugent, who's really been carrying this torch, and I really appreciate his push to make sure that our school year starts well in transportation. We also have in the back of the room, or in the middle of the room, Mr. Kurt Roberts and Mr. Chris Walls from Transpar, who stayed over. They're headed to MAPT tomorrow, but they're here tonight too in case you have questions of them. And I don't know how to fire up my PowerPoint so that we can get started. There we go. So we do have three different agreements before you this evening, and this one's going to overview the two primary ones. The first being our relationship with Transpar. They've been with the district since 1999, and really the focus of their job is to work on our behalf directly with our transportation provider. So they work regularly and daily with them managing that contract. They do the financials, they do all of the routing, and then they work with us scheduling with principals, setting bell times, and those kinds of things. It's their job to be our advocate with First Student. This contract is ending its first 3 years and has 2 one-year options. We're going to be looking at the first one of those tonight. Its annual estimated cost is just over $650,000, which is 7 dedicated staff on site, as well as a couple of administrative personnel who work out of their corporate office and assist us. The second piece of the relationship then is First Student, who actually provides the day-to-day busing of our students for regular trips to and from school, and then extracurricular and other activity trips as well. They own, manage, maintain, repair, and insure the fleet of buses. They employ and manage and train the drivers, and then they provide daily dispatch service between the drivers and families and buses. That contract is in here for second year of a 3-year agreement where we're actually are engaged right now. That's an estimated annual contract of $15.2 million for the year that we've just begun. The real work that's been happening with the 3 gentlemen that I just noted and First Student are the efforts to make sure we get off to a great school year. And we wanted to share these with you because great progress really has been made, and we're really anxious and excited to get this year started. In the spring, the route work was done to actually reduce the necessary fleet, which of course results in savings to the district. We aren't recommending any policy changes relating to routing or anything like that that would cause an increase. We're going to start the year with the same number of buses that we ended roughly, and a slightly reduced driving staff, which is a positive in cost as well, and in viability and sustainability of having your drivers present. It's really important that drivers who know their routes are on those buses every day. So that's a more stable workforce. The route development started in early June. Initial route pairings began July 7th this year as compared to the end of July last year. So we are several weeks ahead of where we were a year ago in that effort. The preliminary routes are going to be delivered by Transpar to First Student no later than July 15th, so again ahead. And practice runs are going to happen on or before August 8th, which is a couple of days ahead of where we were a year ago as well. Really critical to good opening. We're working, Transpar is working with KCPS enrollment and IT departments to get the development of a new opt-out program available so that families can let us know that they won't be participating. And that's going on right now. We'll be ready by the last week of July. Transportation mailers that will end up to families are going to go to the print shop July 26th as compared to August 10th a year ago. So we will be ahead in communicating with families as well. We are, as of today, we updated this slide today because the call that Mr. Nugent led earlier today shows that we only need 10 drivers to be ready to roll for the start of the year, and they have 26 in the process right now for hire. As you probably remember, we started the school year last year 20 drivers short, so we are on course right now to be fully staffed with the subs up and trained and ready as well. So those weekly meetings that have been going on are going to continue, and the focus every week is on that recruitment, the supply of drivers, the routing progress, and where we are with timelines, and most importantly, those communications with families and with our building principals so that we know where we are. So with that, if you don't have questions, we do have a couple of agreements to look at with you.
Okay, are there any questions regarding the transpar? Okay, yes.
And I believe you've indicated this because you've identified the areas of improvement in these in the contracts. And so I think presumably what the board will be able to see in coming months is the adherence of these two substantial contractors and contributors to our district's work. We'll be able to see how that adherence plays out and have a clear sense of the value that we are getting or not getting. Is that correct?
Absolutely. When you're committing 8 to 10% of your total operating budget to one line, which transportation is, the last thing you want is to not hold your partners accountable and responsible. And so that's the efforts that are underway. And I do think that you're going to see that the week before school starts when we give you a report of where we are, and that first week after school.
Mr. Fierro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question is directed more towards Dr. Bedell. First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
To the district. So obviously we know we don't want what happened last year repeated in terms of students not being picked up, et cetera. My question is, where did Transpar Group fit into what happened last year?
Yeah, I would tell you, based on my experience, I learned that I think the ball was dropped by all three entities. Personally, KCPS, Transpar, and First Student. And I also will say that I believe that the relationship between First Student and Transpar was not necessarily on par either. I think what we've done this year was we made an assurance that given where we are, and I had a meeting personally with Transpar, First Student, our attorney. We sat in the room and we clearly articulated what we expect to be done this year and what we will not tolerate in terms of how people are working together. Our livelihood is in the hands of these vendors, and they have to deliver on their services. So I will tell you that that meeting has resulted in where we are right now as far as communication, but I actually point the finger at all three entities involved, and so everybody's doing their part this year, and then we will take a strong look at performance at the end of this year. We believe that we have some other strategies right now that is going to help our school district with some leverage points that we will roll out to the board in the near future.
Thank you.
Ms. Morris?
Yes, well, first, I just received a text that our text line may not be coming through. There have been a couple questions sent that haven't been asked, and while we sort that out, my question is, welcome.
Thank you.
I was gonna say it's premature, but it actually isn't. This looks really good for getting us through the opening of schools smoothly. My follow-up will be, what checks or measures do we have in place to verify that things are going smoothly? Because I'm assuming the best is going to happen. But still, what does the check-in and updating to the superintendent and then subsequently to the board look like in the event there's another mishap, hopefully nowhere near comparable to last year's?
Right now, we are having the regular weekly meetings and getting reports of the planned expectations after the previous week's meeting. We're going to continue that to and through, and I would estimate, and having been my first round, that we'll actually accelerate those. It'll be like maternity visits. As we get closer, we're going to have more of them, and really stay focused. And we can report those to you however you would like for us to do it, but we're updating the superintendent every week with this kind of data that you're getting right here.
Okay, and for the first week of school, especially with students changing schools, not showing up, and those sorts of things, I just want to put out there that it might be key the first week to have daily monitors to make sure we're hitting our times, or at least notifying parents if they're going to be substantial delays to having their students picked up.
We actually had a really robust conversation on that today on the call, relating specifically to the students enroll all the way up to Labor Day as a regular habit. It doesn't matter what school district you're in, which causes stress and duress on the transportation system and on the principals and the building leaders who are trying to get kids home. And so we talked about clear communication, knowing exactly who's doing what. Ivan will be presenting to the principals about what that plan is going to be, because we need to know and respect the fact that first student has limits and restrictions as well. So we're going to be in great communication two-way so that everyone knows what's happening. And absolutely, those first days in, we're going to have people stationed around throughout the district, monitoring and watching loading and unloading. There will be training on those things with our buildings and with our drivers, and a daily report. I imagine that Chris and I will be here late each of those nights, making sure that we know everyone got home safely and that we haven't had any hiccups. And when we do, we will communicate them and we'll make a plan for how we avoid them the next time.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Not so much a question. I'm really glad. I'm a parent that has a child on the bus. So what I love is how far out we are. The one thing I would it's more of a comment, is that communication, because things are going to go wrong. But what I got a lot of calls from parents last year about was when they would call in, I guess, one, being very almost at the upfront, tell parents if something, doesn't go the way, this is the process that you do. So mine was always call transportation, because they absolutely need to know your route, where you are, the time, blah, blah, blah. It needs to be recorded. But even telling parents that ahead of time, so that, and then making sure that experience that they have when they call, that was the other part, which I know you probably know about. I think that those two things will put us light years ahead, because we're going to have some issues. We always do. It's just par for the course, but those will go a long way, I think, improving the experience from a parent's perspective.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that first student focuses on that.
Just for the public to know that our message cube is not working properly, and so we would like for you to please send your questions to our superintendent, and he will make sure that they get answered. His email is askthesup@kcps.org. That's ask the SUPT at kcps.org. Is that right? Okay, at kcpublicschools.org. I'm sorry, ask the soup at kcpublicschools.org. So just reach out with your questions there. Okay, Mr. Farrow.
Just a request, Madam Chair, and it kind of follows my colleague's question about accountability. I think going forward, the type of brief report that I guess I would want to hear is, as things are working or not working, we have three significant stakeholders here. We have Kansas City Public Schools, we have Transpar Group, and we have First Student. So I guess what I'd like to hear as we go forward, the good and the bad, who is upholding their responsibilities and who's not. I'm confident that things will work, but I will just say, first of all, I appreciate the comment that you just made a few minutes ago about you and others working late. And I know what we went through last year. It was our superintendent front and center saying, hey, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to fix this. I appreciate that. But if we're paying vendors and they're not performing, then that is where I don't support that. And I don't feel that we should be putting all that responsibility on our staff when you're fulfilling your responsibility. So again, I'm hopeful that everything will operate smoothly, but the type of report that I would like to see would be just briefly, good and bad. Are all three of those stakeholders upholding their accountability? Because at the same time, if our folks are not doing what they need to do, well then of course our board will then address that as well. Thank you.
And we're delving into a little bit of debate. Maybe there won't be any during that section of the conversation, but it will now be in order to receive a motion on this proposal.
So moved.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the first renewal agreement for C14013 Transportation Management Services with Transpar Group Incorporated with the monthly fee amount of $54,328 and not to exceed a total of $651,936 effective July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2018. Is there any debate on the motion? This will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Ms. Robinson.
Yes, there is a majority in favor of the agreement for school bus transportation service with Transpart Group Incorporated is approved. Item 3.05, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I know that was already included, I believe, in Ms. Quinley's presentation to the board, so at this point, we're asking the board to take action.
Is there any further questions, seeking information or clarity on her presentation? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Move to approve the first student agreement.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve C16009, school bus transportation services with First Student Incorporated in the amount of $15,200,000 for the second year of services, with further amendments to occur on an annual basis in subsequent years effective July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2019, and with 2 additional one-year contract extension options. Is there any debate on the motion? This will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser.
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Ms. Robinson.
Yes, there's a majority in favor of the agreement with the school bus transportation services with First Student Incorporated. It is approved. Item 4.01, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal. With the taxi company.
Yellow taxi?
Yes, the taxi.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
taxi,
looking, I'm like, where is that?
There's
Okay.
a lot on there.
All right, I see, okay, at this time, Ms. Linda Quinley will present.
This is a request to approve the First Amendment to the agreement with Kansas City Taxi related to our alternative mode student transportation services. It's a not to exceed $1.9 million agreement. And again, it's the First Amendment.
Is there any questions seeking clarity? All right, it will now be in order to receive a motion for
I
approval.
move that we adopt this resolution 4.01.
Is there-
Okay, I didn't know if I had to
No,
read.
go ahead.
Okay, 018S007-002, excuse me, a lot of zeros there.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded to approve the First Amendment to the agreement with Kansas City Taxi doing business as Yellow Cab of Kansas City for alternative mode student transportation services not to exceed $1,927,800 for the second year of this agreement, August 1, 2017 through July 31st, 2018. Is there any debate on this motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Ms. Robinson.
Yes, there is a majority in favor in the agreement for the alternative mode school transportation services with Kansas City Taxi is approved. Item 4.02, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
At this time, we're asking the board to take action on cornerstones of,
Yep.
cornerstones of care, and that's a provider. Ms. Thompson is actually coming up. We know it's a provider that supports services for our school districts, for our students.
This is a provider for exceptional ed students contracted out.
Are there any clarifying questions? It will now be in order to receive a motion on this proposal.
I move that we approve 4.02018S007-004 with our contract agreement with Cornerstones of Care not to exceed $1,073,950. $73,000, sorry.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the Fifth Amendment to the service agreement with Cornerstones of Care Incorporated with the cap amount set for 2017-18 school year at $1,073,950. Is there any debate on the motion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Miss Manser,
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey,
Yes.
Miss Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Miss Robinson.
Yes, there is a majority in favor of the Fifth Amendment, and this proposal is approved. Item 4.03, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Linda Quinley will present to the board our recommendation regarding Mid-America Golf and Landscape Sports Construction Company.
This is a recommendation related to the field improvements of East High School, with Mid-America Golf and Landscape being the low bid and the single and low bid on the project at $3,975,950.
Board Member Oates has a clarifying question.
Yeah, a question around information. When is this construction set to begin, should this be approved?
They will begin some of the work, and you'll have to forgive me because I stepped into this. They'll begin some of the demolition and cleanup as quickly as possible to get out of the way of the school year and have to work around sports activities to complete the project.
That was my second question, just about the impact on
Right.
the schools being able to
Have their activities.
have their practices and activities, and if we were making any
It's my understanding,
accommodation.
it's my understanding that they're working with the building leadership on that. I will confirm and let you know that they are planning to work around those activities.
Okay, thank you.
It would now be in order to have a motion to approve this proposal.
So moved.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the C-1728 for renovation of the East High School athletic field with Mid-America Golf and Landscape, doing business as Mid-America Sports Construction, in the amount of $3,975,950, including $275,000 for its account as indicated in the agenda. Is there any debate on this motion? Hearing none, there will be a roll call vote, and the secretary will call the roll.
Miss Manser.
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey.
Yes.
Miss Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
No. Yes, sorry.
Just wanted to see if I was awake. Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Miss Robinson.
Yes, there is a majority in favor, and the agreement with the Mid-America Golf and Landscape is approved. Item 4.04, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Quinley will present Wellner Architects to the board.
This is a recommendation for acceptance of a bid and contract that was issued related to architectural services for Lincoln Middle School, Wellner Architects being deemed the best bid, as is required by statute in the state of Missouri, versus the low bid, at a 6% agreed-to fee after that work was completed.
Is there any clarity needed on the proposal? Yes, Ms. Wolfsey.
So clarity on the proposal. So, if this is approved, are we committed to these dollars in the proposal, and in what time frame if we are?
Yes, ma'am, we would be. If the board authorizes this bid and this contract, once it is signed, then Wellner Architects is authorized to begin the work, and the contract to them would be ours to honor. Timeline-wise, we would start this before you make your final decision on the building renovation project. However, if the Board of Education feels that Lincoln Middle School is in our next 5 to 10 year future, the value of the work that would be done would be preserved and put on the shelf and pulled off at any given time the project were authorized, should it not be authorized in August.
Let me just clarify our process. So we are asking questions for clarity on the proposal. There will be a debate section of our discussion if you are for or against this proposal. So with that, additional clarifying questions, Mr. Oates?
So, clarifying question just around schedule of votes. So, is there an, I guess, advantage or disadvantage of doing this vote today versus a month from now or a year from now? Or just trying to get an idea of why today.
Sure. There is, and I think probably highly unusual that you would see this come to you prior to your conversation you're going to have between now and the end of August. An architect needs a minimum of 90 days to do the architectural and engineering design work on a project this size. And so therefore it's coming to you earlier in the process than you normally would see it in order to have the possibility of hitting an open date of August 1 of 18, should that be the board's goal once the project is fully considered. If we don't do it now, hitting that date would be virtually impossible.
Board Member Hartsfield, Mansur, and Fierro.
Okay, just a question, and I understand the dating, but I'm also understanding then maybe this being brought to the board prior, because I see this was already signed 6/29 by the architect. So there means that this has been considered, discussed for quite some time, but we're just getting it now. That's problematic to me.
This was one of the items that should have come to you at your July meeting, and June, I'm sorry, this is July, and was delayed because of the power outage.
And typically, Dr. Hartsfield, when we get the contracts, they are signed by the other party before we sign them.
I guess since this is contingent to something that we have not planned on, I'm concerned that planning for structure took place without us being in the conversation, and I don't know if we have money for putting things on the shelf.
Okay, can you save that comment just for the debate section? You can expound on that. Okay, Board Member Mansur and then Fierro.
My clarifying question is, my reading of the scope of work is, this is design and engineering. So this is no construction work. This is the development of plans and design.
Correct.
Okay.
Board Member Fierro.
I think, thank you, Madam Chair. I think just my question's a little bit along those lines. So, so the work that they're doing is all with the purpose that eventually you're going to open this building up and have kids in there. It's not, okay, whether kids come or not, we need to preserve the building so that it doesn't fall apart while it's vacant.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it will now be an additional clarifying question?
Yes, and once again, once we approve this and it's signed, this money is non-refundable, correct?
Once the contract is signed, the vendor is entitled to.
So if we decide no to opening Lincoln Middle School for whatever reason, that's lost money?
It would be committed money, and this work would continue. She would have to deliver the product in order to be paid, and the product itself would be available to us whenever we decided to proceed with Lincoln Middle, should we.
And should we not, it's lost money.
Could be considered that, yes.
It would now be in order to have a motion to approve this proposal.
Move to approve the proposal.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It is moved and seconded to approve the contract C-1729 with Wellner Architects for architectural and engineering services at Lincoln Middle, not to exceed $1,144,349, including reimbursable expenses of $112,830 as indicated in the agenda. Would Dr. Hartsfield like to begin the debate on the motion?
I'm concerned with our uses of funds. I understand that we always want to be sure that our buildings are in good conditions when they're being used, but I'm concerned on two parts here. I'm concerned that this is coming to us now for a vote when we're looking at, we have not made a decision about Lincoln, so to me, just how we're making decisions is problematic. Secondly, I don't believe we have any money on the shelf. We're looking at right now students, and that's a reduction in income. So I'm concerned on process and our being our fiduciary responsibility.
Okay, we'll end up with Board Member Morris, and then we'll come to you.
My concerns are in line. Looking at the presentation, we're exploring expansion of Lincoln Middle and Lincoln Prep, and $1.1 million, pretty hefty for an exploration. I need a lot more data showing that the yield, the return we'd get from opening the school would before I'd be, I guess, taking the steps to secure an architect.
Board Member Wolfsey.
So I'm trying not to be redundant here. I'm going to go back to this document that I said I think we all need to read, because I think there's a step that needs to be done before this step. And I do believe we are putting the cart before the horse at this point, and that $1.4 million is a lot for us at this point in time. I think I would feel much different if I knew how Lincoln Middle and the opening of Lincoln Middle fit into the overall landscape of our school system and its impact, positive or negative, on that entire system. That is a question that we asked in November of 2015 as a steering committee, and we had made the recommendation that we undergo a market study and internal assessment to show that Lincoln Prep can, one, this is Lincoln Prep Middle and the high school, because we knew if we opened Lincoln Middle that we would run the risk of being underutilized in both buildings at that time. Attracting enough students to get back up to what we consider the proper amount of utilization in both buildings, and secure sufficient operating funds. At that time, we were talking about a $5 million, I think, start just to open Lincoln Middle, which looks very different than what's in this document, and $3.5 million annual operating for Lincoln Middle. These are old numbers, so I'm sure it's changed. Secure sufficient operating funds without negatively impacting other KCPS schools. So that is my concern, is that we have now put the cart before the horse.
Hearing this discussion, is there a motion to refer this back to the superintendent?
So, yeah, I am thinking long and hard about that, and also maybe considering making approval of this as an amendment to approving, should we approve the plan, so that way they're a tandem vote, if you will, that you know, approval of Lincoln Middle also approves the work with Wellner Architects. I do understand definitely what Ms. Quinley said earlier, that will have an impact. It will have an impact on whether or not, if you're for the opening of Lincoln and we want the school to open August 2018, we are seeding that from a construction basis to August 2019. So I do think there needs to be a lot of thought about that as far as what your feelings are on opening Lincoln as far as being able to vote yay or nay on this. Like, if you feel you're a yes on opening Lincoln this year, I think that it may be worth it for you to approve this, but I just want to be sure that we're all understanding the ramifications of that. So
I would discourage from it being that convoluted, that we be very clear. So we could do that as a step when it's approved.
okay, so like
Yeah.
the next step. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine. Okay.
right. Okay, Dr. Bedell?
Yeah, just a couple of items. I know that there is a provision in the contract that allows for us to cancel 30 days out if needed. Let's say the board decided that they would vote on it today. Ultimately, it is the will of the board, and whatever the decision is, we respect that. We'll move forward. I will say that with us not being able to get this component through, then that pushes this back. It's a 2-year situation in terms of being able to potentially open up a Lincoln Middle if that's an option. And I just simply will say, I agree. I think we've done a lot of landscape studies here, and I know we've shared that information with the community around what's happening with the continuous decline in enrollment when we do have a potential leverage point. So I just want to make sure that I leave that perspective out there.
Okay, yes, Board Member Manser.
So I don't know if this is, I'm going to state this as debate. It's partly a question, really, which is that there's a discomfort that you can see because we're being asked to vote on a contract, but we know that over the next 2.5 week period between July 17th and August 5th, that there's going to be these community discussions. And so I think I'm trying to understand a little bit better what would be the impact by delaying this vote until either the end of August or in September. Is a vote today necessary in order to proceed if given the other exploratory and further work that the board does would, enable us to move on a decision?
The vote today would be about the timeline.
To meet the timeline that was presented?
Would be August of 18.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, Dr. Hartsfield.
I do understand the timeline of 2018, and I can respect that, but I understand also that we cannot allow things coming to us unprepared and not in a timely fashion to push us to make a premature decision. We are a district. We're not a few schools, and we have to be sure that we're servicing all of our students, that we're never saying to any of our students that their facility, their programming deserves less of our attention. And I think we have not done due diligence to be able to make this decision right now. So I take into understanding that if you want to have it ready August 18th, 2018, it needs to be done now. Well, my only statement would have been this should have come to us much earlier than if that was the case. Coming to us at this time does not mean then, without the information, that we should make a hasty vote.
Is there a motion to refer this back to the superintendent?
I make that motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay. Board Member Lewis.
The challenging part, I agree with my colleagues in their comments. Also, the challenging part, Dr. Bedell, for me, once again, is making decisions in isolation. We just saw a strategic plan that talked about where we're going. We don't know how much that's going to cost. We talk about equity. We talk about distributing it to the most needed. But I don't know if this $1 million is going to cost us not to be able to do something 6 months from now or once we get the plan in place for those that have our highest needs. If it's based on policy ends, we talk about those students that are the furthest behind moving at an accelerated level. I don't know the cost of moving those students at an accelerated level. So I almost feel like it would be irresponsible as a board member to approve something that could possibly be $1 million, especially with that price tag, going to waste. It's just simply, or all the other stuff that we're planning on doing around Lincoln Middle and making those decisions is almost like we're just going through the motions, because I can't imagine you saying spend 1.7 million with the possibility. Either you assume that we're going to say yes. I just need the full picture. At some point, I know all decisions can't be made like that, but at some point, I need to have a bigger picture on how it helps us achieve what we just laid out in that strategic plan.
All right, thank you, and I do appreciate the comments. I will just say this, from an urgency standpoint, there are times when we simply don't have the luxury to wait on getting certain decisions done. We know that the 1.4 million, it is a commitment. It is our facility. We own it. So even with that being said, if we do go through with potentially doing this schematic study on the building, it's still our building. It gives us opportunities, it gives us data. Should we have another use for that building, whether it's a Lincoln Middle School or not facility? The other piece is, I know that we did send out the timeline over a month ago or so. I also know that we tried to, we wanted to set up meetings earlier. We wanted to set up an opportunity to go deeper into this conversation. We weren't able to meet. We wanted to do this back in April. We couldn't get a group enough to meet. So, it's not due to the lack of administration coming to the board and just at last trying to do last minute things. We tried to set up meetings. And so I just have to make sure I put that out there, that it's not due to us coming to the board with last minute items and trying to make a move without the board being fully aware and informed.
We'll take one more comment and then we will vote. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
So, kind of to the point of making the decision in isolation, we have had the information, to your point, Dr. Bedell. However, the part that we haven't had, and this wasn't you, the information we really need is the market analysis. This is my opinion, because one of my main concerns is making a decision in isolation without the proper information. We may be creating another problem down the line. And by that I mean, I know we want to have more seats for high schoolers so we can gather those charter students that maybe we've lost back into our high schools, specifically Lincoln, where we know we have wait lists and we don't have enough seats at the high school level. Then we open the middle school. If we don't know exactly what that is and the impact that could have, that could actually lower our overall enrollment. And that is not what our goal is in this particular case. And so, and I say that because I know it had been discussed at some point, does that middle have that same score, that cut score that Lincoln Middle currently does? If it does not, within a few years, you could be back in the same situation of having another school that has more people trying to apply to it than actually can get in. And that doesn't solve a problem at all. That's created another issue. And it could have negatively impacted both the potential to open up a Southern Boundary Middle School and the current enrollment at Southeast. So that's why I'm having a real concern about getting that market research analysis. The other point I wanted to make very quickly was I do understand that we are losing a lot of students to charter schools. But I have said this over and over. We haven't marketed or recruited. We've promoted enrollment, which is not in the same vein as marketing and recruitment, for 20 years. So let's not make a short-term decision when we haven't been doing the other part of what we should be doing to fill our seats in our schools.
It is moved and seconded to refer the matter of the contract with Wellner Architects and Architectural Engineering Services back to the superintendent. This will be a roll call vote. Those in favor will respond yes. Those opposed will respond no. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Ms. Robinson.
Yes, there is a majority in favor to refer the matter back to the superintendent is approved. For item 4.05, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
All right, we'll have Ms. Erin Thompson to come up and present Sherwood Center.
Okay, Sherwood Center is another exceptional ed contract that we contract out for our students 3 to 21 under the Disability Education Act.
Are there any clarifying questions?
I move to adopt this motion, or
Second?
It is moved and seconded to approve the service agreement with Sherwood Center for Exceptional Education Services for fiscal year 18 in the amount of $1,370,128 as indicated in the agenda. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, the secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield.
Yes.
And Ms. Robinson.
Yes, there's a majority in favor, and the service agreement with Sherwood Center is approved. Item 4.06, the chair recognizes Dr. Bedell to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, we will ask the board to take action on educational-based services. We give that to Erin Thompson.
This contract is an exceptional ed contract for physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
Move to approve item 4.06018S007011, educational-based services for $2.1 million.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the service agreement with educational-based services for supplying therapists and special education certified teachers for fiscal year 18, as KCPS shall require to staff its facilities, and with the contract amount not to exceed $2.1 million as indicated in the agenda. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing no debate, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser.
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro.
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield.
Yes.
And Ms. Robinson.
Yes. There are 16 items on the combined consent agendas for June and July. It will be in order to receive a motion to approve the June and July consent agenda items.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda items 5.01 through 6.07 on the agenda.
Second.
06, I'm sorry.
Second that motion.
It is moved and seconded to approve the items on the consent agendas for June and July. This will be a roll call vote. Those in favor will respond yes. Those opposed will respond no. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser.
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro.
Yes.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield, and Ms. Robinson.
Yes, there's a majority in favor, and the items on the June and July consent agendas are approved. Dr. Bedell is recognized for a brief recognition.
Yeah, Dr. Sanders, would you please stand? Dr. Sanders is now our athletic director, and we're extremely excited to have you in that new role.
Thank you so much. Anything from the board that I can help, we will get our athletic program rock and roll, and our goal is to get state in every program.
And I know we had one other individual that started with us on the 3rd. That's new, Dr. Marla Shepard, who's our Deputy Superintendent over Instruction. You all will have an opportunity to hear her, in particular when we're doing our board workshops and looking at our accountability from an academic standpoint.
And great job, Ms. Quinley, on being thrown into the fire. Awesome job. Thank you.
Just hope she comes back.
Yes, you will be here tomorrow, right? Okay. This brings us to the conclusion of our agenda for the evening. So if there's no objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.